That new two-piece clutch cable on the 2018 and newer Harley-Davidson Softails is great, but how in the heck do you replace the top half? Let's check it out. How's it going, everybody? My name is Ron, and here on this channel I tackle projects of all sizes related to the bikes I ride, and I give you information about those projects and the different products that I try. So be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and enable all notifications so you'll be alerted whenever I post new videos. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to remove that upper clutch cable. In a previous video, I showed you how to adjust the Freeplay. I'll link to that video here. And in another previous video, I gave you the details on how to do a complete clutch adjustment down behind the derby cover in the clutch basket. I'll link to that video here as well. But in today's video, we're just going to cover how to remove and or replace that upper clutch cable. It's a really simple process, but it is a little bit fiddly. So we're going to take a look at that in detail today. And shout out to 𝗧𝗕𝗓𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗕𝗓𝗏 because he is one of the folks who asked for instructions on how to actually remove that upper clutch cable. So thanks so much for that idea. Glad to incorporate that into a video for you. As I alluded to in the intro, with the 2018 models, Harley-Davidson introduced this new two-piece clutch cable, and it's absolutely fabulous. It is so easy to work with. It makes adjustments a breeze. And as you're about to see, replacing the upper clutch cable is really simple also. So if you need to swap out your bars and change the length of your clutch cable, this will really facilitate that process and make things easy. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen my video on the Ape Hangers on the Softail, check that out. I'll link to that here. And I give you all the information about the 17-inch 𝗧𝗔𝗕𝗟𝗘 strip bars that you see here on the street bob beside me. When you read the manual, they basically just tell you how to line everything up and how to sort of move things around and disconnect it, but there's no special tools referenced or anything like that. So you won't have any problem doing this yourself because it doesn't take anything but normal tools that you're going to have in your toolbox. So let's take a look at the process. You'll see a lot of these steps are the same as what's involved in setting the Freeplay on the lever, because much of what we do interacts with that same part of the cable, and the process that you have to go through once you're finished replacing the cable obviously involves setting the Freeplay. So the first step in this is, of course, popping that metal clamp off of the frame tube so that you can have access to that upper clutch cable. Then you slide that plastic cover up that covers that adjustment mechanism on the bottom end of the upper clutch cable. You then pop that red clip outward by pressing in the two little tabs and pushing that outward, and then that will allow that spring to expand fully. Once that clip is out, you want to actually compress that spring and then snap that little red clip back in so that it holds that fully compressed. You can then go up to the lever and pull that out of the perch so that your lever swings free. Pop that mirror off, remove the circlip, slide the pivot pin out, and then gently remove that lever from the perch. And then you can remove that white plastic clip, which holds the cable eye into the lever. And now everything is freed up. You may want to release that from the lever at the end of this process after you've disconnected it at the bottom. It's totally up to you. I've done it both ways. Depending on whether you want to follow the steps in the Harley-Davidson manual, they have you actually moving the lever here as part of that process of disengaging the bottom end of that cable. I didn't do it that way. I'll explain the way I did it. So for the process that I'm going to explain, it really shouldn't matter whether you disconnect the top half of the cable now or at the end after you've done the bottom disconnection. Now we can go down to the bottom of the cable where that yellow plastic piece is and the red adjustment clip. This is the part that's a little bit fiddly, but just take your time, experiment with some different tools and techniques, and I'm sure you'll come up with something that'll work right for you. And the way I do it differs slightly from the Harley-Davidson manual. The way the Harley-Davidson manual tells you to do it is to actually use the lever, squeeze the lever in so that you can move that retainer up and down inside that yellow connector to be able to gain access to it. I found that it's easier for me just to use the spring adjuster down on that bottom half of the cable itself rather than dealing with the clutch lever. So as I said, you're going to have to figure out which process works best for you. But for me, I went ahead and disengaged the cable at the beginning of the process, and then I just used that spring on the yellow adjuster to make the movements that I need. If you take a look at that yellow adjuster, you're going to see a few different parts. And the first parts you will see are at the top, and we've already worked with those. You've got the red clip and you've got the spring for adjusting the Freeplay. And then down at the bottom of that yellow connector, you're going to see a couple of yellow flex fingers that hold that yellow piece to the lower clutch cable. And then right above those flex fingers, you're going to see two oval windows, one on each side of that connector. And you'll want to spin that oval window around so that you can clearly see inside that oval window And when you look inside that little oval window, you're gonna see the ball end for the lower clutch cable. You're gonna see a little retainer that ball end is sitting in, or a coupler if you wanna call it that. And then you're gonna see a little metal tab that is probably bent around the top of that ball end. So to start out this process, you can just bend that metal tab up so that it is no longer retaining that ball end. And then you wanna release the red clip so that it puts spring tension on that adjuster. And then you can push down on the top of that spring adjuster, and as that little coupler inside that sight window drops down, push through the back side of that yellow adjuster through the other little sight window and push that lower clutch cable towards the outside, so that as you drop that coupler down, that cable and ball end pushes out. Once that cable and ball end are free from that coupler, you can release the pressure on that spring and allow that coupler to come up, and then at that point the two should be disconnected. So again, you may have to play around with this a little bit and try a couple of different techniques. It took me 3 or 4 tries to get it because things would pop loose, or I'd try to pull it out with a hooked piece of wire or something like that. And it ended up that the screwdriver from the backside seemed to work best in order to get everything disconnected. So it's the right combination of downward pressure and outward pressure and lining everything up and working with it until you get it disconnected. And then once you've gotten that disconnected, all you have to do is pry those little yellow flex fingers out and pop that yellow connector off of the lower clutch cable. Then you can drop your new cable in place, snap that yellow portion onto the lower clutch cable, and basically you just want to reverse that process. So you start by pushing the lower clutch cable ball end towards the outside of that sight window, and then you can push down on that spring adjuster so that that little coupler drops down into position. And once it's below the edge of that ball end on that cable, push the cable into that little coupler and then release the tension on that spring so that that coupler grabs that ball end. Make sure that it's seated firmly in those grooves in that coupler. And then all you have to do is bend that metal tab back around that ball end so that it's kind of hugging the profile of that ball end, and everything should be secured at that point. You're done with the hard stuff, and all you have to do is install the top half of that cable and set your Freeplay adjustment. So to get that process done, insert the cable eye back into your lever, install that plastic retaining clip, and then insert that into the perch itself, drop in your pivot pin, reinstall your circlip, and then pull that cable housing out and install it into the perch so that it seats in there correctly. And then you can go back down to that yellow adjuster. If you haven't already released that red clip so that it puts spring tension on that upper clutch cable, go ahead and do that now. You want that spring fully expanded so that it puts pressure on that housing. Check to make sure that everything's seated into that perch the right way, and give the lever a couple of squeezes to make sure that everything is moving freely against that spring tension on the adjuster down at the bottom. Then all you have to do is go down to that yellow adjuster, press that red button in so that it locks that adjuster, and then give your clutch lever a squeeze 2 or 3 times to make sure that everything is moving freely and everything is settled back into place, and then check your Freeplay. And what you need to do to check your Freeplay is to hold that clutch cable with one hand and then use your other hand to mash that clutch lever. And then as you press, you should be able to move that cable back and forth. And if you check the distance between the end of that cable ferrule and the perch itself, the manual says that distance should be between a 1/16 of an inch and an 1/8 of an inch. I try to keep it as small as possible, more like a 1/16 of an inch. And if you see that you have more Freeplay than that, just go back down to that adjuster, release that red clip, and that should add more spring tension to the top half of that housing. Snap the red button back in on that adjuster, and then go back and check your Freeplay again. After you do that a few times, everything should settle in and you should get back to the point where you're at a 1/16 of an inch to an 1/8 of an inch. And if for some reason it's not adjusting out correctly, you may need to do the full clutch adjustment down behind the derby cover. And again, there will be a link to that video in the description below. But assuming everything was working before you did this cable swap, everything should be just fine after you've done this cable swap, because it's a kind of a plug and play process. Everything just comes out and goes right back in. So if everything was in spec before, it'll be in spec now. If you're happy with your Freeplay, all you have to do is slide that tube back down over your adjuster, snap your frame clip in place, and you are done with that process. Drop in a comment and let me know if you've replaced the upper clutch cable on your bike and how did that process go for you. Did you run into any problems, or did you discover any new tips or tricks that you could pass on to me and the other viewers? Drop in as much information as you can. I love hearing about that, and I'm sure the rest of the viewers appreciate that input as well. And if you found this video beneficial or useful, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button and share it with your friends. That really helps the channel out. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Please do consider subscribing, hitting that notification bell, and enabling all notifications so you'll be alerted whenever I post new videos. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the ride. I'll see you next time.